Good evening, Poe fans. Welcome back to Poe Discussions with Carmen and Jeanie. Hey, Jeanie.
Hey Carmen, how's it going?
Going very well, and we are celebrating this month for horror and Lovecraft, and that's why Jeanie has the Lovecraft on Poe. But we have a very special guest tonight that is living and from the same city as Lovecraft, and that is Levi Leland. So, welcome, Levi.
That's right. Thank you, Carmen. I appreciate the introduction.
Yes,
Of course, I'm a big fan of you guys and
thank you.
podcasts and book clubs and the review morgue. I love all of it. So
Thank you.
I'm happy to be a part of this episode today, kind of talking about myself and my work and everything I've done uh, in in the Poe world, in the in Poe scholarship, dare I say. But I'm apprehensive about the scholarship thing because,
Well, hey, scholars come in all different shapes and sizes. So you have your own scholarship. There's individual scholarships, there's group and scholarships. So you are your own scholarship.
That's right.
That's right. That's right. That's the stamp I'm putting on it for sure.
There you go.
Yes.
But yeah, so a little bit of my background, just especially in terms of Poe, is I'm a born and raised Rhode Islander, and I was introduced to Poe like a lot of us, like right around middle school. It was like seventh, eighth grade. It was around Halloween, and I was going to my science class, but it wasn't our science teacher that was there. It was a substitute, and it was like a Friday. It was like the last class of the day. So it was like, just a chill kind of October, right before the weekend vibe in middle school. And this substitute read us Poe instead of doing whatever the teacher had prepared for her to do.
Hmm.
And that was my first introduction to Poe. And I was like, something about Poe just resonated. I loved it. It was, his works were like gruesome and horrific, obviously. And I don't know, before that, I was kind of always into like, creepy kind of like horror, but not like I hadn't found the genre yet. I hadn't found like the real a real example of it that kind of
Hmm.
I was able to like really subscribe to. And Poe was just it. I was like, yeah, wow, this is it. And then it snowballed from there. I think within 2 years, my mom took me to Baltimore. I went to his grave and to, his house that is a museum.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was like 14 years old. And then, by the time I was 16, I had gone to, the Poe Museum in Richmond, Virginia, the museum in the Bronx. In fact, I won like this art contest when I was like 15, for the cottage in the Bronx. They were hosting this like uh, time capsule contest where, as they were renovating the cottage,
Hmm.
they had all the walls torn down. So they were like, the Preservation Society thought it'd be cool to host a contest and for the winners to put their art in a capsule and put it in the wall.
Yeah.
And so I was like the youngest winner out of like 500 entries. I came in the top 10. I was like second place and the youngest winner with this little pen and ink drawing I did of Poe. Um, and so eventually I had been to every Poe museum, Poe site,
Hmm.
including, Boston. There's no museum there, but it's a Poe site, it's a Poe place.
Yeah.
Um, and then as I got a little older, like 19, 20, and then early 20s especially, I was like, what can I do to kind of carve out my own niche in the Poe world, in the Poe community? Because, I had all this knowledge, I had all this passion, I was this like staunch Poe enthusiast, but I didn't really know what to do with the outlet. I dabbled a little bit in art and stuff, but I wasn't gonna like illustrate a book on Poe or like, And then I realized that, well, Poe was in Rhode Island. He was in Providence. And, you read about it in biographies all the time. Sometimes, I mean, it might get a brief mention. Sometimes it's just a couple sentences that, say, oh, he was engaged to Sarah Helen Whitman briefly and it ended tumultuously and that was it. So I was like, maybe that was my niche. I was like, this is my home state. This is the city that I adore. And maybe I can kind of be the spokesman for Poe and Providence. And so that's what kind of kicked it off. And so I
Yeah.
started doing really heavy research into Poe and, of course, Sarah Helen Whitman, because she was responsible for Poe's extended time here. And she had her own very interesting, kind of amazing history in Providence in her own right that I was starting to really unearth and learn more about. And so I started tracing the sites and I started gathering information and going to the John Hay Library, which is one of Brown University's libraries that house Sarah Helen Whitman's papers, as well as a lock of Poe's hair. They have the daguerreotype of Poe, the Whitman daguerreotype that was taken in Providence. And from Sarah Helen Whitman's own hand, I started compiling this information and compiling her recollections of Poe and reading her correspondence with different Poe biographers and people in her own life in her younger years that really didn't relate to Poe, but kind of gave me more insight into her as a person
Mhm.
and maybe why Poe was attracted to her, why Poe saw this soulmate within her, you know? Um, and so I made a website, edgarallanpoeri.com.
Mhm.
And that website, I just started kind of compiling all this information about Poe and Providence and Poe's time, you know, in Rhode Island as the little state that we are. Jeannie, of course, knows that we are our
The
own little
anthill.
state. She's got a lot to comment about it, but Rhode Island is a state. It's not a rock. It's not an island. It's a state.
Exactly.
But so after I did the website, I, thought maybe I could do something to kind of present this information to the public, and really get my personality and my character in it too, because the website is very informational and it's very factual, it's well researched, it's well sourced, Um, but I kind of wanted to talk to people and meet people and you know, uh, also tell this story firsthand, and tell this history. And so that's when I noticed I could make like a really decent walking tour because some of the key sites in the Poe, in Poe, associated to Poe's time in Providence and his relationship with Sarah Helen Whitman, they make like this like 1 mile loop, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. So then I made a walking tour of Poe's Providence, which that slowly came together, and I wrote the script and kind of added all my fun quotes and just it really came together and I'm so proud of it. And I was able to debut the tour in 2021. So now I've had uh 3 successful seasons of a walking tour of Post Providence to date. In fact, last week was my last tour of this season, and it was my most successful one yet. I'm happy to report.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. It's been so much fun. Like I've met people like neighbors that I never knew were interested in Poe or in that kind of that subject. And then I've met people all over the country, really. I mean, there have been some people that, traveled to Providence for Lovecraft, I'll admit,
Hmm.
but they found my tour during their travel planning and they were like, this is on the itinerary. And so people have traveled from, great distances to come on the tour. Carmen is no exception of that.
Yes, and it is an amazing tour. I learned so much about Sarah Helen Whitman and just the Poe connections that they had together. And Levi is just a wealth of knowledge and just appreciated that so much. And my husband loved it too. So,
Yeah, that was great. I had so much fun meeting you guys in person
yeah.
and yeah, giving you guys the tour because yeah, you guys are Poe people and there have been a lot of Poe people on the tour, but a lot of people didn't realize that how significant Poe's connection to Providence is, He
Mhm.
was there, he was back and forth, within 3 months, in 1848 toward the end of his life,
Mhm.
right less than a year before his life, ended,
Yeah.
sadly. Um, and and people don't realize what Providence witnessed in Poe's biography. And then Sarah Helen Whitman, of course, is never usually more than a footnote in his biography, and just, oh, brief fiance, ended the engagement because he broke his vow of sobriety. And
Mhm.
oh well, people, oh, what a prude she must have been, but that's all we know. And even locally, like local lore, you know, um, I heard about Sarah Helen Whitman from people that knew of her through her connection to Poe, but that was it. It was always just, oh, she was engaged to Poe. And
Mhm.
then I'm doing this research and I'm digging through her papers, her actual papers, and tracing these sites associated with her and reading recollections from people that knew her. And she was way more than that. She was way more than just like Poe's brief fiance. She had such a claim um, in her own right, in her own work, that, I say that people come on my tour for Poe, but then they leave with Whitman,
Ah.
because they're like, wow, she was so fascinating, and I make it a point to celebrate her legacy, of course, inside her relationship to Poe and then outside of it.
Mm.
Um, but the thing with her is, yes, the relationship ended terribly, and they left on bad terms. And
Mhm.
then, of course, Poe dies less than a year later. He made an attempt to reach out to her. He did send her a letter, but he was very harsh in the letter, very cold, and she didn't reply, and then he dies. And even though they left on those terms, and even though she ignored that last letter that he had sent, she spent the rest of her 30 years becoming like the first Poe scholar. She was like corresponding with biographers. She was telling um, anyone and everyone interested in Poe about his life, about his works, about her relationship with him,
Mhm.
um, sharing her materials, the photograph that she had of Poe, the daguerreotype that she had of Poe, articles that, that were written by other people, but that she recommended as genuine. And, because of course we know after Poe's death, there was a lot being published about him that wasn't accurate, and just, it was hard to sift through those things. And she made it an effort to set these facts straight. And, she wrote her own biography on Poe that like directly refuted Griswold's slanders.
Mhm.
Um, she helped translate his works in French. She corresponded with Stéphane Mallarmé, and
Ah.
the French poet, and helped bring his works to Europe, to French readers. And of course, in her own works, she wrote a ton of poetry about her relationship with Poe, about Poe himself. Um, she just was so incredible and so amazing. And honestly, even today, when I'm going down the rabbit hole, as we all do with Poe sometimes, when we think
Yeah.
of something that, we have a question that we want answered, and we do our research and we dig through, you'll find that a lot of information is from Sarah Helen Whitman that she either sourced, or stuff that Poe had told her during their romance, and she made a point to write it down and to, you
Mhm.
know, make a note of it to a biographer, or it comes from her. She was like, when you think of some of the other women that Poe is associated with, like Marie Louise Shue,
Mhm.
Sarah Elmira Royster,
Mhm.
um, Nancy Richmond, um, they kind of stayed kind of quiet about Poe, and
Ah.
you know, um, but no, Sarah Helen Whitman was just right up there on that platform. And
Ah.
like, hey, I knew him. I was engaged to him briefly, and let me tell you this, that, and the other thing. And she was a poet herself, an essayist, um, social reformer. She did so much, but she was like the first woman, I think, that could really approach Poe intellectually, and
Yeah.
um, come from that understanding of his true genius. And she knew how to kind of push his works and to push his biography in the right direction, so that it would really be well taken care of for those future generations. Without her, I don't really know where we'd be, honestly, in Poe studies.
That's true, and it's difficult to even, well, I guess I don't want to say difficult. It's so hard to fathom, like you said, what would we be like in the dark about if
Right,
she hadn't done the things she did? I mean, she
right.
was revolutionary for her time as a
Hmm.
woman doing these things, and
Yep.
overlooking her probably last feelings of him breaking his vows to her, but
Hmm.
she respected the man, she respected the artist, and
Yep.
his spirit alive, which is just oh, it's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
Well, it
she's
was a
such a gem.
testament to her love. It was a
Mhm.
testament to her love and respect for Poe that she continued to fight for him even after he was gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I love, one of the anecdotes that I love, and I don't even share this on my tour, but um the Locke family of Lowell, the people that were responsible for introducing Poe to Annie Richmond.
Hmm.
Um, so after Poe's death, they came to Providence and they visited Sarah Helen Whitman. And so during that visit, of course, Poe is dead, and the Locks were telling Whitman about some of the nasty things Poe was saying about her in 1849, in that year right after their relationship was over, because he had gone back to Lowell and visited with the Locks, and of course when they asked him about what became of the engagement and Mrs. Whitman, and he said some nasty things apparently about her and about the situation. And so now the Locks were visiting Whitman and trying to then tell her what he said and talk badly about him to her.
Hmm.
And she interrupted them. She put her hand up and she stopped them. And she said, if what you're saying is true, and if he really did say those things, um, then I can forgive him. But if they aren't true, he's not here to defend himself. So I don't want to hear them. And that was it. And then she ended it,
Yeah.
so dignified and just so reasonable as a person.
Hmm.
She was just amazing. She carried no ill feelings. She All she wanted to do was recognize this genius that she had the opportunity to know for a brief time and love.
Hmm.
And she wanted to make sure that he went down to posterity in a proper light. And
Um,
so just an incredible woman all around. I Of course, Poe is always going to be my main flame, but Sarah Helen Whitman has become a very easy second to Poe for me.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
she's right in my own backyard, so I get to appreciate her history and legacy close by anytime that I want, which is great.
Absolutely. And so you kind of shared the story on our Halloween special of how you finally got to go in her house.
Yeah.
And so I just that was so exciting because I remember us standing in front of her
Yeah.
house when we were on the walking tour, and you're like, I just really want to go inside. And I was just so happy
Yep.
you finally got to go in. So
Thank you. Yeah. And that was like what, 2 years ago or I can't
yeah,
remember.
yeah.
So it's
Let's
about
yeah, it
two
was two
years
years
ago.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, and yep, we were standing right there. And then finally I made that connection, someone who lived inside the house because it's now 5 apartment units all
Okay.
subdivided.
Hmm.
Yeah, uh, one of the occupants, one of the residents came on the tour and introduced herself to me afterward and invited me to come inside because in Whitman's time, of course, the house it was just an open floor plan, but it was a two-family house. So her mother rented it from the landlord who lived on the north side, and they lived on the south side.
Hmm.
And of course, on the south side of that house is where Poe would have been
Yeah.
received and would have spent time, and you know, and this resident just happened to live in one of the apartments on the south side of the house, so it worked out. She was on the proper side,
Yeah.
and it was obviously it's the inside has been mostly changed, renovated when it was subdivided. A lot of the original hardware and um,
Hmm.
just a lot of the original bones of the house stripped.
Hmm.
But when you're inside of just the structure itself and you know the history that took place there, and Poe is within those four walls,
Yes.
regardless, you feel that energy, you feel that
Hmm.
you get those chills, when you visit a Poe place like today, like Baltimore or New
Hmm.
York or Philadelphia, you feel it. And I did, I felt that really uh kind of and that just that energy. It's just such an energy, because you've studied something for so long and you study about just what transpired in that space, and then you get to be in the space. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Oof,
It's very surreal. Definitely.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
When I came down the stairway, and then back toward the front door and the vestibule or whatever they'd call it. I
Yeah.
just in my head very quickly had a flash of kind of Whitman coming down the stairs, and there would have been Poe standing there waiting for her to,
Yeah.
receive him. That's what you can place those little moments, and that's what's so surreal about it. It's
Yeah.
really
It's just so cool to think about.
yeah.
So on the walking tour,
Mhm.
is there like a favorite place like when you get, as you're going along? Like,
That's a good, yeah, that's not, I've never really been asked that about a favorite place in particular. I think Sarah Helen Whitman's residence itself, that 88 Benefit Street, the red house at the corner of Church and Benefit is really significant in its own way. And I always just love being there because I just picture that's where Poe would have visited, and that's the
Mhm.
house he would have traveled to, and that's where he called on Sarah Helen Whitman for the first time.
Yeah.
Um and of course he saw her for the first time in the backyard.
Mhm.
um, but a lot of people respond to the Providence Athenaeum, which is the
It's
library
incredible.
further down on Benefit, where they spent a lot of time together. And um, it's like the fourth oldest library in the country, established in 1836. Um, and, Whitman spent a lot of time there her whole life. But Poe, of course, during his time in Providence, he spent a lot of time there, and he's one of their most celebrated visitors. They
Yeah.
have artifacts, the Ulalume printed in the American Review anonymously. Um, they have a copy of it that he signed with a pencil. He defaced their library book, but he signed it because Whitman was asking him about the poem, and she didn't know that he was the author, and so he took the volume and he signed it. And today, they still have that preserved in their collections, and so they have like not just like the oral history of Poe's time there and some of the anecdotes, but they
Hmm.
have tangible artifacts that he touched and signed and handled. And, you know, people go inside, and that's where they kind of feel that like spiritual kind of connection between
Hmm.
Poe and Sarah Helen Whitman and just the library itself. And that's the place that gets the most response. So, and of course, it's I've been a member there now for like 5 years, so you know, um, it's dear to my heart too, and that's where a lot of people will really feel that energy is the
Right.
Athenaeum, and it's such a beautiful place. It's like this Greek revival style building, and with the columns in front, the pillars, and
Mhm.
um you go inside and it's just books everywhere,
Yeah.
and busts of all these prominent people in history. And then, you turn around and there's Poe above the entryway, Quinn's bust of Poe that
Mhm.
I helped to get to the Athenaeum. So I like to take that credit when I can,
Absolutely.
is that
Yes,
I
that is
got Poe back to the
incredible.
Athenaeum,
Yeah.
nearly 2 centuries later. Um, and so that was cool. But yeah, it's just a really magical place, the Athenaeum. So any listeners right now who haven't been to Providence, or maybe they have been to Providence but haven't been to the Athenaeum, definitely check out the Athenaeum. You'll feel otherworldly things in there for
I
sure.
totally agree because the first trip that we made to Providence, Jeff and I, my husband, we went there because I knew that Poe and Sarah Helen Whitman kind of courted there,
Hmm.
and And so it was just amazing walking in and thinking, it obviously the benches and things were not there
Mhm.
when they were there, but I'm like, there could have been a bench here and they sat here together.
Oh yeah.
And I
Yep.
remember, because they had the card catalog, so I pulled it out, looked for Poe, and took a picture of that. And
Yep.
I did not know about you could request to see the Ulalume where he signed it. And so next time I'm up there, I'm definitely going
Yes.
to see that.
You
Yeah.
definitely have to check it out and let me
Yeah.
know ahead of time because
Oh, yeah,
they're pretty
absolutely.
good about it, and I can probably have them take out everything
Oh, that
that
would be
they do
great.
have, so you can see their full Poe collection
Yeah.
in its
Oh, that'll be
extent.
great.
Yep.
Yeah, and I will say too, just going on the tour, just the rose bushes in behind her house.
Hmm.
I do you know if they are samplings from the roses that were there when she lived there?
Yeah. So the funny story about that, I like to say that they are the offspring, you know.
Mhm,
I mean, where they're located is where the garden was, right in
mhm,
back of her home, right near um the church, where the church comes
mhm.
to an end, the hall. But I had someone on the tour mention the 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 stems or the roots of the rose bushes were not old enough to have dated back to, 1848,
Okay.
you know. Um, but I don't know. They could be because I feel like roses, like I had a rose bush in my yard that I ended up digging out because I had other things kind of to arrange,
Yeah.
to plant there. And the rose bush, it came back. Roses started, you know. So
Hmm.
I think maybe somewhere along the line, if they did end up kind of digging everything up and kind of re-establishing
Hmm.
the
The
you know
garden
the
area.
gardens and
Yeah.
everything,
Mhm.
maybe the roses just happened to pop their way back up, and
They
they
could
kept them.
have. Yeah.
They're not as old, but they are still the offspring. They were still in the ground.
Yeah.
So they very well could be. So I always kind of romanticize it though. I like to say this is the rose garden. This is the enchanted garden, as
Yes.
Poe called it in his poem that he wrote to Whitman. Um, but there, nonetheless, it's a beautiful rose garden still, and
Hmm.
every summer they're in full bloom, and there are yellow roses, white roses, pink roses, red roses. It's beautiful, and I just love going there in the summertime and just kind of looking at that garden and picturing Whitman there, and then picturing Poe kind of stopping and seeing her
Hmm.
and being
It's
so
such,
struck by her presence and her beauty.
yeah, it's such a neat story.
Yeah, it's so cool. It is. It's
Absolutely.
it's really romantic. It would make a great little movie, honestly.
Oh, it would.
You
Okay.
know?
All right, Levi, you need
Yeah,
to.
I know. I know. Right, here we go. Another project. Let me get going on that. If only I was like a director or something, or I don't know.
Oh, I know. I know.
I need to find someone with a
With all of
connection.
our Poe connections, I think we know some people that do movies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, I know who you're talking about, and maybe they will do something like that. Stray from the works and start doing little biographical
Mm,
short films on Poe's life. That would be really cool.
that would be really cool. Oh my goodness. So there's some other things that you have done with Poe that have just come out recently. If you want to
Yeah,
talk about
yeah. I
that.
can share that. So this past September, this anthology was published.
Hmm.
It's called More Than Love: The Enduring Fascination with Edgar Allan Poe, and it's edited by Amy Armiento. She was a former president of the Poe Studies Association.
Hmm.
Um, in 2022, I think it was, the Poe Studies Association came to Providence as part of their Boston conference, and they took like a mini version of my tour. That's all they had time for, but essentially it was, the Whitman residence, the Rose Garden, St. John's. We got to kind of do that little loop,
Okay.
and the Athenaeum.
Hmm.
And so that's when I met Amy, and I think it was about a year after that, she had contacted me about this anthology she was editing.
Okay.
And so it's available on Amazon. I'll mention that for anyone that wants to purchase it. It's pretty affordable, like 25 bucks, like your average book, I guess. And it's well worth it. It's a compilation of essays, um, reflective essays, kind of uh, all regarding people's introductions to Poe and how Poe has influenced their lives, whether professionally or a hobby or something that, impacts their life and impacts their day to day. And so she contacted me about contributing an essay based on the tour because she was a fan of the tour. She loved that I kind of had carved out the Providence niche of Poe
Mhm.
because before then there wasn't really anybody doing that. So she was like, that's cool. You've got your own space and you're kind
Yeah.
of helping promote Poe and Sarah Helen Whitman and that kind of part of his life.
Hmm.
So I got to contribute an essay and anyone that reads the essay and anyone that's also listening to this podcast um, will get the full, even fuller version of the things I'm talking about now, if
Yeah.
there can be such a thing. I know I'm probably rambling, but
Oh,
yeah,
no, no.
there's a great group of people in this book who contributed essays. Admittedly, some I do not know or have never heard of, and
Yeah.
some that are quite well known and people in the Poe community that you hear about all the time.
Yeah.
Um, but I read every essay, and I mean, just spectacular entries, and you
Hmm.
know, and this past Poe Fest, um, we did a book reading and a signing at Westminster Hall, and people were already talking to Amy like, you have to do another edition and do more because there are so many more people who could write such a good essay about Poe and his influence in their lives. And she was in agreement. She was like, yeah, maybe a second a sequel to this is in order because so many people could write such a great essay about their introduction to Poe.
Hmm.
Um, but it's super cool because what I learned kind of in reading all these essays, you know, a lot of people's introduction to Poe are very similar.
Hmm.
They were introduced to his works in school, or they saw the Vincent Price, Roger Corman movies, or you
Hmm.
know they had a relative that liked Poe and gave them a collected Poe works, and they very similar, but how they took it and rolled with it and how it affected them are also different. And
Yeah.
that's what's really cool about reading it is, you learn a little bit about Poe, of course, but you more so learn about individuals and I think that resonates to a lot of people, especially to Poe fans and I think they'll get a lot from it. It's such a good idea for a book. We get
Hmm.
all the anthologies of, people writing fiction or poetry, which
Hmm.
are great. And I love reading those and how, Poe inspires their work and their art.
Hmm.
Um, but you very seldom see kind of how Poe inspires or has inspired people's lives or their professions or, you know, and you're a good example of that where Poe has inspired your writing and your poetry, but
Hmm.
also I'm sure he inspires you as a teacher and Jeannie as well,
Absolutely.
being a former, teacher.
Yes.
You get that professional side of Poe, the creative side of Poe that helps you
Hmm.
and influences you, I'm sure, in so many ways. So
Oh, it does. I mean, especially in my writing, but even I've done some Poe art
that's right.
and I try to link things that are outside of Poe to, like my art. And I don't do my art as much as I do the writing. And then of course I sew a lot.
Hmm.
But yeah, and teaching as well. I wish I could teach more Poe. It's just not in our curriculum to do that. So as much as
Right.
I can. But I would say, Jeannie, you probably want to talk on this too.
Well, it just the thing about it, the Poe influence, like Levi was talking about, everybody kind of has the same intro with the middle school and the works and all that kind of stuff. My first intro to Poe was Annabel Lee, that we had to memorize that and recite it in sixth grade. And so I wasn't a true diehard Poe fan yet, but I did get that introduction, and it spurned my own kind of creativity because he touched me. But as I've talked with Poe Unplugged on certain avenues over the years with my life experiences, my connection to Poe and what he connects in me has changed and has become more. And so the Poe that I fell in love with early is not the same Poe that I am in love with now, because I
Oh,
still love his work, but I love his work from a different point of view.
Yeah.
that's really well
And
said.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and he has inspired me lately to work on my poetry again, and I've tried to do some writing. I haven't really got back into that yet because I got out of writing for a while for some personal tragedy regions, but it's really hard to get back into something
Mm,
when you're trying to put yourself back on the paper when you're not ready.
Yeah.
Because as you know, Levi, even with your writing an essay, you're still putting you on that paper. You're
Mhm.
still
yeah.
putting yourself out there for other people to read and other people to see you, whether it's in the written word or whatever. And that's kind of hard to do when you're not ready to see it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
certainly.
so seeing and hearing from other people is kind of therapeutic, and
Mhm.
reading with other people's points of view about how they feel about Poe is also therapeutic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I like it from that area. And I am looking forward to when this book comes out. And I do hope they do more because, like you said, there's so many more people out there
Mhm.
that can contribute, and maybe even uh, spurn more people getting Poe involved,
Yeah.
Right.
because they may find something and go, wow, I didn't know that, or hey, I identify with that, I can see that because that's
Mhm.
me. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm very glad, and I wish that I could have come to do your tour with you, but last time I was in Providence, you weren't doing the tour because that was
Yeah.
like back in 2010. So
Yeah. Fairly
yeah,
fairly new thing. Yeah.
yeah.
But
So
hopefully we can catch you one of these times, or at
Yes.
oh yeah,
least I do have a virtual version, like a presentation version that I'll do at libraries and stuff.
oh
Hmm.
Um
cool.
so maybe even a virtual tour, virtual talk would suffice.
Oh yeah,
Um
I would love to do the in person, and good Lord's willing, maybe someday soon.
yep.
If not, I will definitely hop on the virtual train
Yeah, there you go.
and follow your
You're always
trail.
welcome in the Ocean State
That's right,
on the island.
on that anthill.
On
Uh,
the anthill. Yep. On the anthill.
hey, it's better than what they used to call it back in the Puritan days. It used to be the sewer. So
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because you've brought that
yeah,
up before.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it used to be the sewer. I kind of upgraded it to the anthill,
Yeah, I'll
even though,
take
and I
anthill. I'll take anthill over sewer, I think.
exactly.
My
But
goodness.
it is a beauty. It's a beautiful state, and it
Yes.
is, known as the ocean state because even though that little small sliver that it has is on the ocean, which is kind of
Yeah.
ironic that it's the smallest state, but it's called the ocean state. But it
Yeah.
has less
Right.
land area of the ocean than I think any other state in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's its
But
own strange little conundrum, but
but it actually works with the history of Rhode Island because, in my opinion, Rhode Island is a contradiction in terms all the way around, from its name to what it started out as. Because it was the dumping ground for the Puritan that would kick people out of their group And
Hmm.
instead of them going back to England, they would run down to that area and say, "Nah, nah, da boo boo, you
Yep,
can't catch me." So,
that's right.
and they were like, "Hey, we're still Puritans. What are you gonna do about it?"
Yeah,
So, but
yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's
perfect.
yeah. See, so it's a great little state, and
Yes.
I and that little walking tour, and that's the one thing I wanted to say about you describing your walking tour. And I love this is why I love whenever I visit anywhere is finding a walking tour because it
Mm,
pleases my history heart to
Yeah,
know that
yeah,
somebody is imparting history. And if people listen and really listen, they learn. And when they learn, it opens a whole new world for them.
absolutely.
yeah,
Hmm.
And so
totally.
that's why it's so exciting when you talk about, you said yourself, you found that Sarah Whitman brought a whole new level to the game for
Hmm.
Poe that nobody knew anything about.
Right,
So
right.
because of that, she is, even though everybody knew her as a lady of Poe instead of a lady of the night, she was a lady of Poe. Uh,
Yeah,
uh, she became a staunch supporter and a advocate and a true hero in
Yeah,
her day. So,
yeah, that's a
um,
good way to describe her. She really was such a
yeah,
hero.
yeah,
because there's so few women,
I
but that's
agree.
the thing. There was a lot more women than many people know of that took their places in history and made a made a point in history, but they won't ever be remembered unless somebody makes you remember.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and
So,
that's how these people live on
mhm,
genuinely.
Hmm.
Um, so it's kind of our job to make sure some of these really important figures
mhm,
get get their stories told, and I learned that very quickly with Sarah Helen Whitman. Her story was often overshadowed by Poe,
mhm,
but she had so much of her own story to give, but also within Poe as well. And I often I don't think a lot of Poe scholars or Poe, whatever writing whatever kind of content they are on Poe, I don't think they even give her enough credit sometimes for
Yeah.
what she did. You'll hear about, Nathaniel Parker Willis writing an article of kind of defending Poe.
Hmm.
You'll hear about Charles Dickens, giving some money to Maria Clem after Poe's death when she was poor and destitute. You'll hear about some of these other people. Um, some people are like, oh, and Elmira Royster, she gave that interview, um, in 1871 or something about Poe. And it was like, yeah, and decades between, her knowing Poe and that point, she denied ever even knowing him. So it's like,
Yeah.
but Sarah Helen Whitman from the start voiced her mission, and
Mhm.
she defended Poe from the start without hesitation. And so often, yeah, I think she deserves a little bit more credit, even in her own right, and even, well, especially in her own right, but even in her Poe scholarship, even in her own
mhm.
Poe studies, she really did so much
Yeah.
for him. And even facing her own adversities in her own lifetime, being a woman, being a widow, having to take care of her family, um, she did everything right in her life, morally and intellectually. I mean, she was brilliant. So
Yeah.
it's been really a privilege for me, honestly, to be able to put her on this pedestal too. And I think people appreciate it, especially when
Mhm.
they walk away from a tour and they're like, wow, they want to kind of know more about Sarah Helen Whitman because they already kind of know a lot about Poe, and now they want to learn a little bit more about him. I'm sorry, about her.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and as far as the book goes, I mean, some of the essays in here are so well written. They're so um deeply layered and just poignant, and they made me think and reflect. I mean,
Mhm.
um, a handful of authors here did a fantastic job with that. And I mean, everybody in the anthology did a fantastic job. They contributed a fantastic piece. But you'll as you go through and you read, some of them are going to hit you in a way that you that just kind of makes you think and really kind of it's like a gut punch. It's like, wow, yeah, that's how deep Poe goes, and that's how deeply rooted he is, and how he can affect people today in ways that you'd never think possible. Um, so
Yeah.
I highly recommend the book, not just because I'm in it. Um,
Nothing wrong with that.
No.
right.
Good plug, good
Yeah.
plug.
And and I've got a copy. I just have not had a chance to make time to read it yet because I've been doing some other
Oh yeah. It's been
reading.
busy
Or
season.
it has, yes.
Yeah, busy season. October is like
Yeah,
Poe season,
it
and
is. It
even the months
is.
before and after are still kind of, so no pressure. And it's
Oh
again,
yeah.
the other good thing about the book, it is a leisurely read, so it's like you don't have to put a lot of pressure on yourself to
Yeah.
pick it up because they're just reflective essays, and like it's almost like a fun read. It's a light read.
Hmm.
But of course you'll find some of the essays a bit heavy and poignant, and uh so that's what's good about it. It's, you can kind of take your time with it, and you don't have to rush, or you don't have to put pressure on yourself. You can just pick it up when you have the time and
Oh
enjoy
yeah. Well,
the
and
contents.
I think too for me and Jeannie, it's going to be really cool to read about these Poe connections because that's what our podcast is all about.
Yes,
And so
exactly.
it's like adding another little layer for us.
Yep. Plenty of
Yep.
guest opportunities in this book.
Yes, yes.
Some of them have already been on your podcast.
Yay.
Chris
Yes,
Semner,
yes,
Mark DeWidziak. I mean, yeah,
yes.
you've already had a few on there, but you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
It opens the door for us that we can dig out more Poe people.
yeah.
Are you being punny, Jeannie, with digging out, like as in digging
Um,
up from the ground?
I don't know what you're talking about. I would never do that. I'm not a punny person.
Oh, please.
So, Levi, tell us what is on the horizon for you and the Pope.
So yeah, so I have a really, really exciting project currently in the works.
Mhm.
I have to be vague publicly
Understand?
because
Yes.
it has not been announced yet, and I've been told I can't announce too many details, but people can look forward to next year
Okay.
a by an in-print publishing company um,
Hmm.
from one of the five major publishing companies of the English language. So these are
Hey,
all hints. Um,
Yay.
Imprint Publishing Company, they're going to be doing a really cool series of Poe, I'm sorry, author biographies. Um, and so I have been contracted to write the Poe one. So
woo-hoo.
very exciting.
Yay.
I don't even know if I shared too much by saying that, but there will be announcements soon, and as soon as there are announcements, I will let you guys know so you can advertise for it or post about it, and maybe I can be on next year when the book comes out. We can talk more
Yes,
about it. But yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
this is gonna be really cool. It's gonna be really cool. I love their concept with this series, and of course, being able to write the Poe one. Getting to compile everything I've learned about Poe and all my favorite facts about Poe's life and everything has been really cool. So you guys can everyone can look forward to that if they're
Yes.
interested. It'll be a nice like introductory type biography because it's not like some critical, like it's not Arthur Hobson Quinn's, critical biography of Poe, or
Yeah.
it's it's like a combination of like digestible, but also like we dig in there. You get to know Poe. Like it's
Okay.
not just surface level stuff. Um, so I'm excited about it.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, and then besides that, I have my website people can visit if they're interested in learning a little bit more about Poe's time in Providence and Rhode Island. And, I do have a tour season that I schedule and I release that schedule for people to join on
Mhm.
a tour, but I do private tours all year round. So if someone's brave enough to go in January or if they're brave enough to go in August, I will do it. Just reach out, we'll take a tour, either whether we freeze to death or sweat to death, that's totally their call. I like to accommodate anybody, especially because people travel and, you
Yeah.
know, I want to accommodate people for tours. So any listeners that want to join a tour or are coming to Rhode Island off season, just reach out through the website. Um, and we'll get you on a tour for sure.
That's awesome. And we will share out all of your links as well.
Mhm.
Uh,
Oh, thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
like on the social media and when we do our newsletter. So
Cool.
it's
All right.
Hey, and
Awesome.
I can adjudicate to the point of going to an off-season tour because I've been in the Boston area during the 18-inch snow, the blizzards and stuff. It is a whole different world to see
Wow.
things in that area because I went to the Met Museum during that time, during the blizzard, and it just made it much more
Yeah.
because you could see it, you could feel it, but you were looking at a picturesque outside before you went inside to the museum.
neat.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
it just gave you better, a more ambiance of feeling of seeing the world from two different perspectives.
Yeah.
And it was great. So I
Mm.
can just imagine, and yes, it'd probably be horrible for the walking in that
Oh,
when you're out on a
especially
tour, but at the
uphill
same
or
time, if
downhill.
you're brave
Yeah.
enough to do it,
Right.
it could give you a whole new world.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Disney
No, I
pun
love.
intended.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because I think the setting is important, especially like for my tour because I'm telling the romance from start to finish. I'm talking about Poe's time in Providence from start to finish. And the romance took place from September to December of
Mm-hmm.
1848. And so I start my tour season in late September and we go until early November because then it just starts to get too cold. But you're kind of in Providence during the same exact time Poe is in Providence, just starting in his romance with Sarah Helen Whitman. So with the change in the temperature and the foliage and just you're literally walking in their footsteps and
Mm-hmm.
also during the same time that they would have been together walking those same paths. So it helps kind of set the tone of the tour and it helps
Uh,
really get people immersed into the story because one thing that I'm proud about the tour is that it's of course informational. It's all informational, but it's also kind of a story. It has this type of narrative that kind of creates this arc. Um, and I think people get kind of immersed in it. So they're kind of living it. It's like living history almost. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so exciting for me to be able to like share that. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Jeannie, because yeah, a lot of the time, like something as simple as like the weather can really
Mm-hmm.
have an effect on the history of the
mhm.
place you're like representing.
Yeah.
Um it's so cool. So, I'm so passionate about it even years later. Like I get on a tour and I'm just so excited to share it with people. And I love when people match that energy and they're just like, so excited to just hear the story and get into it. It's just such a privilege, honestly, for me to kind of occupy this space and to have been able to do this. Um, I'm just so fortunate in that respect.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, Levi, this is one question we always ask all of our guests. So, what is your favorite Poe poem or short story?
Okay, you guys, all right, you're probably gonna hate my answer. I was afraid that you were gonna ask me this. Okay, so there's a story. So my favorite Poe story is a story that is not officially um credited to him. So it's called A Dream. It was
Mm-hmm.
published in Baltimore.
Mhm.
It was signed just P, so
Okay.
not, but it was right around when he started writing fiction,
Mhm.
um, and or prose. Um, and it's on the eapoe.org website, so people can look. It's obviously not included in anthologies or anything, but
Ah,
it's it's when you read it, you know it's his work. You can tell by the language, you can tell, but we just can't officially say it's his. And it's of course one of his earliest prose pieces, but
mm.
essentially, I don't want to spoil too much of it, but it takes a biblical tone, and it's essentially about one of the people that crucified Jesus.
Oh, wow.
And you would never think Poe would write something about that, but
Yeah.
and it's really short. It's like
Mhm.
probably shorter than The Telltale Heart. It's
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
so I won't give much more away, but I want
Mhm.
to implore people to read it because it's
Yeah.
fascinating. And you can find it on eapo.org. It's called A Dream.
Okay.
But I can't officially say that's my favorite story because it's not technically credited to him. But Jeannie's gonna hate me.
Oh,
Oh no.
I found I oh some words with the mummy. Honestly, I revisited the story last year around this time. Like I
mhm.
had read it probably when I was in high school or something and didn't
Yeah.
think too much of it. I reread it last year for the first time. I think probably after I heard Jeannie complain about it on one of the
Yep.
podcasts. And so I was like, you know what, let me read it because I want to revisit it. And I don't know why. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was kind of dumb, but like so funny. I love in the beginning how the narrator is talking about he had just finished his supper. He
Mhm.
had some kind of rabbit to eat
Mm-hmm.
and he had just made his way to bed. And I don't know. And then, his friend calls on him in his house to go to his other friend's house to unwrap this mummy. And I don't know why. I never really had read a Poe story before that where Poe put a lot of like kind of daily things behind the narrator where like, oh, finished supper and went to bed and then a friend called. Like it was just so real that I was like, I love this story. And then the mummy comes to life and they're he's going back and forth with the partiers about how, you know, the Egyptian people were more sophisticated than the Victorian people, and I don't know. I do like that story a lot,
I do
so it
too.
kind of became like a secondary favorite. But then to make Jeannie feel better, I'll say that Berenice or Berenice, whatever you prefer,
Yeah.
is my favorite like horror. That's kind of
Mhm.
always been my favorite horror story of Poe because it's just so gruesome and it
Oh,
was
it
kind of
is.
his introduction to horror and um it's just that's always kind of been my favorite. But now I have those other two that kind of took a front row seat. But I'll leave it at
I won't hold it against you because
that.
I understand when people, when people have that reaction to some words with a mummy. That's okay.
Right.
I can understand that, and I can see it from your point of view when you talk about it and stuff. The only problem, and this goes back to my own issues that I have when it comes to stupid comedy.
Hmm.
I cannot stand stupid comedy. And I think
Yeah.
that's why it bothered me so bad because, yes, even though he was talking about daily life, he was just being so irrational with things and it was just so stupid. It's
Yeah.
like, this doesn't make, yeah, why? And it just, I don't know. It just, oh,
Yeah.
it's
I
like
get
when
I
the
get that.
kids, yeah, it's like when the kids would ask me if I was going to go watch these movies that were coming out that were, all about the stupid comedy.
Hmm.
And I would tell them, I'm like, why would I need to go watch a movie about stupid comedy when all I have to do is just watch you on a daily basis? Because watching you walk into a wall because you happen to be looking down instead of looking up, It's
Yeah.
pretty much the exact same thing. So I don't need to waste my money or waste my time or anything like
I
that because I can get that right here.
Yeah, I get that. It's almost like too easy. It's too
Exactly.
easy, right? Yeah, and like with Poe's satire, it's all very like none of it really is funny, like and in a way.
Yeah.
Um, but like I get what you're saying, and Some Words with a Mummy is probably one of the better examples that you're conveying
Mm,
about just like the on and on where it's so stupid, and then you think there's going to be a really good like punchline, and there really wasn't. Like the punchline was that the Victorian people said, well, we dress better than the Egyptians did,
Right.
and then they're like,
yeah.
okay, and that way, and it was like, okay, I get like that.
That's
I
all
guess it was just,
I
yeah, it was just funny, and I don't know, like in that
Yeah.
sense, but
Yeah. The
um,
punchline was it wanted me to punch somebody. That's what it
yeah,
was. Because I'm like, what the hell?
right, that's too funny.
got.
Yeah.
Well,
So, but I don't begrudge anybody that likes it. Everybody has their own thing.
It
oh,
grew on me. It
Yeah.
definitely grew on me when I reread it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Maybe it will if I try to reread it. I probably not. I may not need to.
yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
need to
want to
get
be
my blood
around you
pressure up
when you
right now.
reread it.
Yeah, you might get punched.
I know.
Exactly. I'm like,
Oh,
what?
well, and Levi, we are reading Berenice, like however you want to pronounce it.
Yeah.
We're doing
Or
that
burn it.
unplugged on
Oh,
the November 26th, that Tuesday night. So if you're available,
nice.
join us.
I'll look forward to that for
Yeah,
sure.
Mhm.
yeah,
Can't wait.
yeah.
Yep.
So,
It's gonna be a goodie.
well, Levi, anything else you want to like add to share with our listeners and viewers about anything?
I think I covered most of it. Of course,
Okay.
anyone can follow me, Facebook or Instagram. Not that I'm super active on either of those, but if I do have any updates, I always post them there too. If anybody wants to, you know, follow me on social media. I think I have a Facebook group too, Friends of Sarah Helen Whitman, that
Okay.
just I don't post a lot on there either. Nobody does, but when something comes up, it'll be there. And then I have a page for the walking tour. So a walking tour of Post Providence as well. And
Oh,
that's just again, just updates on the tour and things of that nature because most people have Facebook and it's just easier to follow updates through social media rather than like going on my website and looking at the page.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Well, thank
Um,
you so much for joining us. This has been an awesome afternoon with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I had
and
so much fun.
Yeah.
finding your book, you can find it on Amazon, right? Or
Yeah,
other
it's
places. Yeah.
yep. So far, Amazon, I think, and then I think Amy is trying to get it in a lot of like local bookstores, and
Okay.
Okay.
so you might just happen to see it at a local bookstore if she's one of the bookstores that if that's one of the bookstores she got it in. But
Okay.
Amazon's
Okay.
the best way right now, easiest way, and it comes to you within days, obviously. So it's very convenient and
And I think I
Okay.
remembered seeing it. It is at the Poe Museum bookstore, I believe. Is that correct?
Okay. Oh, yeah, I would
I think
imagine
I
because
remember.
Chris is one of the contributors, so it's probably in
Yeah.
the Poe Museum. I haven't been on their gift shop the website
Yeah.
but if yeah, maybe Chris got it on the website too through the gift shop, which
Okay.
perfect way too. I'm glad you said that because
Yeah.
that way people can also support the museum as
Hmm.
well when buying the book. I'm
Absolutely.
sure any profit that was made goes to the museum, so
Yeah.
that's
I think
awesome.
I remember seeing it when I was there back in the middle of or early to middle October. So
Okay, cool. I didn't know that, so that's good.
yeah, I think don't yeah, and
Yeah,
I'll have
well,
to check the website and
It would make sense if it was, like you
yeah,
said, since he was a contributor to the book.
right.
So.
yeah.
All right. So
Well, all right. Well, I guess Jeannie,
we are
are
oh
out.